Have you ever told a lie so big, so utterly essential, that it slowly ceased to be a deception and instead solidified into impenetrable armor? Have you ever buried your truest self, your stark, inconvenient singleness, your undeniable availability, just to claw your way into the professional space you deserve, the respect you crave? This is my story, because I did just that. I swallowed my identity whole. I swore I was married, when, of course, there was no ring, no vows, no man waiting. I forged this necessary fiction to secure the job I coveted, the career I ached for. But I never, not in my wildest, most calculated nightmares, imagined that lie would become the invisible current pulling me directly into the path of the one man who could not only expose it, but shatter every meticulously constructed piece of my life. My existence is a monument, cold and flawless, painstakingly calibrated for control. I am Aisha, 29, a black woman from London, and every sharp line, every strategic angle, every subtle shade of my professional being is a deliberate act of carving out territory in a world fundamentally hostile to my presence. Specifically, the high-stakes, brutally traditional, and often suffocating corporate sectors of Asia. This wasn't merely about glass ceilings. It was about navigating labyrinthine cultural codes, deciphering unspoken expectations, and enduring the constant, soul-draining pressure to prove my worth in a landscape where my very existence was an anomaly, a potential disruption, a foreign element threatening to destabilize the rigid order. 2 years ago, I landed in Seoul, shedding the damped ambition of a London that, while acknowledging my drive, never quite offered the full, unforgiving runway my hunger deserved. 5'11", a silhouette cut from dark mahogany, usually encased in a formidable structure of silk and wool. Tonight, it was a bespoke charcoal suit, severe shoulders, trousers that moved with a liquid, graceful defiance. My hair, a sleek, architectural statement, was pulled back, meant to convey one thing: unwavering, almost dangerous focus. But I also know this intensity often reads as a challenge, an unspoken defiance. It was a deliberate choice, a refusal to soften, to shrink, to make myself palatable. This honed edge, forged over years of being underestimated, tokenized, and dismissed, was both my shield and my sharpest weapon. And in the rigid, patriarchal offices of Seoul, that sharp aesthetic was a profound liability. It invited the subtle, insidious question, masked in politeness: are you married? Do you have children? It was the corporate code for: can we trust you to be stable, predictable, safely occupied by another man so you can dedicate your entire being to our corporation without distraction? A single, ambitious woman, especially one who didn't fit the expected mold, was a wild card, a potential disruption, to the carefully balanced ecosystem of family-run conglomerates. For 2 years, my honesty was a dangerous luxury. My truth was deemed too volatile. 2 major regional projects both slipped through my fingers. The feedback always couched in vague, dismissive terms about cultural fit or long-term commitment concerns. My singular focus, my unattached status, was consistently misinterpreted as a lack of grounding, a potential disruption to the carefully cultivated jong, deep, emotional connection that bound corporate families. The solution, a chillingly pragmatic one, came one rainy night over a bowl of soju, offered by Minho, my loyal South Korean best friend, whose cynical gaze understood the cold, logical constraints better than I ever could. "Wear the ring, Aisha," he'd urged, sliding a crumpled napkin across the table like an illicit proposal for a dark pact. "It is a professional amulet, a shield. The respect they deny the single woman, they will grant the married one." "It's a key, not a cage, if you choose to see it that way," he'd added, his eyes reflecting the frantic, blurred neon glow of the street outside, mirroring the frantic urgency in his voice. I had argued, my voice tight with indignation, "It's a lie, Minho, a complete fabrication of my identity." But he'd only shrugged, a gesture of weary, almost cynical resignation. It is a necessary fiction then, one that allows you to play the game on their terms so you can eventually change the rules, or perhaps break them entirely. I hated the forced surrender. I hated the corrosive deceit, the tightening noose of the lie even before it had begun to constrict. But the prize, the creative direction for the massive Shin family luxury hotel chain, was too significant to lose over ancient, stifling bias. I bought the simplest, most functional gold band I could find. It wasn't a symbol of love or union, of connection or hope. It was a cold, hard piece of professional armor, a thinly veiled shackle that promised security at the cost of myself. A thin, unadorned circle of metal that felt utterly alien on my finger, a bitter, constant reminder of the compromise I'd made, of the part of myself I'd buried alive. The day I slipped the cold metal onto my finger, my ascent began. The subtle shifts were immediate, almost imperceptible to an outsider, but glaringly, horrifyingly obvious to me. The lingering, probing questions ceased. The polite, yet invasive, inquiries about my weekends vanished. I was no longer a potential disruption, a loose cannon. I was a known quantity, safely anchored, and therefore professionally viable. A lie, the purest distillation of deceit, had made me safe. The collision. The meeting was held in the Shin Media Group Tower, a shimmering, impossible needle piercing the Seoul skyline, a monument to corporate power. The room itself, a temple of glass and steel, felt cold enough to shatter, yet I was burning with a dangerous, almost reckless anticipation. My pulse didn't just thrum, it hammered with the sharp, merciless edge of battle readiness, a premonition of conflict. Every detail of my presentation had been meticulously crafted, every potential challenge anticipated, every weakness armored with layers of logic and strategic beauty. I was ready to conquer. Then Shin Jae-sung entered. The very air in the room seemed to compress, to grow heavy and still, the light subtly dimming as if acknowledging a superior, almost predatory presence. He didn't merely walk, he traversed the space with the coiled grace of a man who understood the profound gravitational pull of his own authority, a silent, absolute command. He was not merely handsome, he was sculpted from granite and shadow, a dangerous blend of inherited power and self-forged discipline. His navy suit was a work of art, enhancing the sharp, severe lines of his face and the intimidating height of his frame. His dark eyes, like polished obsidian, held a frightening depth of intelligence, a watchful, assessing intensity that seemed to strip away pretenses. He looked less like a corporate successor and more like the singular deity of this kingdom, poised to strike. He crossed the room and offered his hand. The instant his palm met mine, a raw, electric tremor shot through me, a disorienting shockwave. His grip was warm, firm, and astonishingly, unnervingly familiar. It was not a professional handshake. It was a connection, a jolt that reverberated through my entire being, as if we had met countless times in some other life, in some forbidden dream. Potent and entirely unbidden, it threatened to unravel the carefully woven fabric of my control, exposing the vulnerable truth beneath. Aisha C. His voice was a deep, resonant rumble, entirely too intimate for a first meeting, a sound that bypassed my ears and settled directly in my chest, a dangerous vibration. Your work speaks a global language. It is profoundly dangerous. He didn't elaborate, but his eyes conveyed an instant, unsettling recognition of the subversive power in my designs, how they challenged convention, how they dared to suggest new ways of experiencing luxury, new ways of being. It was dangerous because it was revolutionary, and revolution, even in aesthetics, threatened the established order, and perhaps the quiet, carefully maintained order of my own heart. For the next hour, we didn't negotiate. We danced on the razor's edge of intellectual sparring. It was a thrilling, dangerous pas de deux of minds, moving past color palettes and into the philosophy of experience, the psychological impact of space, the very essence of human aspiration. He didn't just see my designs. He saw the why, the underlying hunger. He challenged the fundamental assumptions of my aesthetic, not with dismissal, but with a keen, incisive curiosity that forced me to articulate my vision with a depth I hadn't known I possessed. In that space, under the silent, powerful hum of his gaze, I forgot the contract, the glittering city lights, and the heavy lie weighing on my finger. I was consumed by the electric, dangerous focus in his eyes, a dangerous, exhilarating oblivion. A close-up of desire. He was mid-sentence, dissecting the necessary audacity of the hotel lobby design, his voice a low, compelling rhythm. He paused, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a terrifying, deliberate fraction of a second, a silent trespass, before snapping back up to my eyes. The sudden, intense focus felt like a physical weight, crushing my chest, stealing my breath. The freezing, sterile air of the boardroom suddenly turned thick and humid, charged with an invisible, reckless current that defied the rigid, professional geometry of the room. My breath hitched, a silent gasp caught in my throat, choked by the sudden intensity. I felt the universe tilt, my meticulously ordered world shifting violently on its axis, not because of the stakes of the deal, but because of the seismic shift he had just triggered within me. I realized with a jolt of visceral dread and exhilarating possibility that I was looking at the most dangerous collaboration of my life, a profound threat to my controlled existence. If he had asked me to stay, if he had expressed any interest beyond the purely professional, I knew, with a terrifying certainty that resonated deep in my bones, I would have dropped the entire perfect, lonely structure of my career to follow that current. I would have shattered my monument to control for the chance, however fleeting, of something real, something truly alive, something I had convinced myself I didn't need, something I had buried. The fraying thread. The contract was signed. 3 months of high-intensity, total collaboration loomed before me, a professional triumph wrapped in personal dread. The professional elation, sharp and fleeting, was quickly crushed by the sheer, suffocating dread of the proximity required, the relentless, intimate exposure to the man who saw too much. How could I maintain my carefully constructed facade, the armor of the ring, when every fiber of my being was screaming a different, desperate truth in his presence? We stood for the final formal handshake, the air still thick with the aftermath of our intellectual battle and the silent, searing currents that had passed between us. Jae-sung's gaze drifted from my eyes, following the clean, taut line of my arm, settling with deliberate, unnerving weight on the gold band, a silent, pointed question. He smiled, a slight, almost painful contraction of his severe features, a brief, enigmatic flicker. It was a look of instant, profound recognition, as if the ring confirmed some pre-existing hypothesis he held about me, or perhaps about the inherent sacrifices demanded by the world. "Ah," he murmured, his thumb brushing the very edge of the ring, a gesture so quick it might have been imagined, yet it burned like a brand. The casual, accidental touch was pure agony, a violation of the fragile boundary I'd erected, a direct assault on my lie. His words were polite, perfectly composed, yet laced with an undercurrent I couldn't quite decipher. Was it genuine well-wishing or a veiled, knowing acknowledgement of the precise, painful nature of my sacrifice? "My apologies, Aisha. Congratulations. It must afford you a great deal of comfort during such demanding professional periods." The lie felt cold and metallic against my racing pulse, a chilling counterpoint to the burning heat his touch had left behind. I was paralyzed by the sincerity in his eyes, the understanding, or so I desperately believed, that this ring, this lie, was a necessary professional tool, a bitter compromise. My throat seized, tight with unspoken truths. I couldn't speak. The cost of admission was already too high, measured in years of struggle, in the relentless suppression of my own identity, in the slow death of my true self. "Thank you, Jaesong-si," I forced out, my voice thin, brittle, almost unrecognizable. "It is necessary for my work." His enigmatic smile vanished, replaced by an expression of deep, shared melancholy. He held my gaze for a long moment, acknowledging not just the ring, but the unspoken, crushing weight of commitment, of unseen chains. "I understand the necessity of such commitments," he said, the words heavy with resignation, a silent burden as he finally released my hand. His fingers lingered for a fraction of a second too long, a silent acknowledgement of the connection he was forced to sever, a reluctant surrender to an unseen force. "More than you know." The phrase hung in the air, a tantalizing hint of his own hidden burdens, a mirror reflecting my own carefully guarded secrets, drawing me deeper into the treacherous currents between us, a shared prison of expectation. The pressure cooker. The weeks that followed were spent in a state of exquisite, controlled torment. Our adjacent offices, separated only by a sliding glass wall, offered a constant visual proximity that felt both a blessing and a curse. Through the transparent barrier, I could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the fierce concentration in his brow, the way he ran a hand through his dark hair when a problem proved particularly intractable. Each glimpse was a small, sharp stab, a reminder of the impenetrable barrier between us, yet also a perverse comfort, a shared burden of ambition, a dangerous addiction I couldn't seem to break. I never left before him, a competitive yet strangely intimate ritual, a dangerous push and pull. To concede first would be to show weakness, to admit the unbearable strain, to break the fragile tension humming between us, a tension that was both suffocating and strangely exhilarating. One Tuesday, past 12:30 in the morning, the entire floor was silent, a tomb of corporate ambition, filled only with the ghosts of deadlines. I was without my heels, my black silk blouse wrinkled, running purely on adrenaline and the dangerous, intoxicating proximity of the man next door, a proximity that felt like both a lifeline and a slowly tightening noose. Jasong entered my space. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie gone, the top button of his shirt undone. The sight of him, slightly disheveled and utterly dedicated, was more intoxicating than any perfectly tailored suit, revealing a raw human intensity that resonated deep within me, threatening to dismantle my every defense. "We need to finalize the Shanghai schedule now," he stated, leaning against the doorframe, his presence a casual invasion that altered the air pressure in the room, making it thick, suffocating. "It's scheduled," I confirmed, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands, none of the frantic beating of my heart. He didn't move. His gaze was searching, direct, as if he were looking for cracks in my polished facade, for a weakness he could exploit, or perhaps understand. "Does your husband, Min-ho-si, accommodate this professional dedication easily? The late hours, the travel?" he asked, the false name falling from his lips like a stone, the curiosity in his voice edged with a strange, searching envy, a subtle, dangerous probe into the fragility of my lie. He wasn't just asking about Minho, he was asking about the cost, the sacrifice, the unspoken dynamics of a life I pretended to lead, comparing it, I suspected, to his own burdens, his own gilded cage. The false name felt like an ugly intrusion, a stone thrown into the fragile, silent pond of our unspoken connection, shattering the delicate surface. Minho understands, I lied, reinforcing my fortress of control with every syllable, layering the deception. He supports the commitment required of us. I had to constantly reinforce the lie, layer by layer, burying myself further beneath its crushing weight, even as every fiber of my being screamed for honesty, for release, for the dangerous truth to break free, to finally detonate. The nearness of truth. He moved off the frame, crossing to my desk. He was looking at a schematic on my screen, but his entire focus was a radiant, undeniable heat directed at me, a palpable energy that made my skin prickle. He leaned over, pointing to a detail on the monitor. His chest was inches from my shoulder. The powerful, masculine scent of him, wood smoke and clean linen, was a physical fact that drowned out the hum of the AC, blurring the sterile edges of the corporate space, blurring the edges of my control. My senses reeled, every nerve ending hyper-aware of his closeness, of the precarious balance of the moment, of the abyss opening beneath us. Then, reaching past me for the mouse, his strong fingers brushed the bare skin of my arm, just above the cuff of my blouse. It was instantaneous, accidental, and utterly devastating. A tremor of pure electric awareness shot through my body, leaving me paralyzed, unable to breathe. My breathing hitched, a silent, choked gasp. I was rigid with the terror of my own overwhelming reaction, a shockwave that went straight to my core, threatening to shatter every carefully constructed boundary, every brittle defense. It wasn't just physical, it was a profound recognition, a soul-deep resonance that shook the very foundations of my carefully constructed world, exposing its fragility. He straightened immediately, his eyes slamming into mine. He saw the naked shock and the answering, reckless fire in my gaze. His own face flashed with a profound, instantaneous desire, followed by agonizing guilt, a stark battle waged in the depths of his obsidian eyes. The CEO dissolved, replaced by a man battling a fundamental instinctual urge that defied all professional boundaries, all social conventions, all duty. He took a sharp, painful step back, creating a sudden, gaping chasm between us where moments before there had been an electric bridge, a dangerous connection. He was visibly rebuilding the wall, brick by agonizing brick, reinforcing the defenses against a truth that had momentarily shattered them, against a desire too potent to ignore. "My apologies," he clipped out, the words now sharp and cold, a desperate attempt to regain control. His voice was devoid of warmth, a stark contrast to the burning heat that still radiated from my skin where he had touched me. "Review the load-bearing reports. Good night, Aisha C." He left, the glass door sliding shut with a soft, final hiss, a sound of echoing the closing of a tomb. But the room remained saturated with the heat of his near touch and the agonizing certainty of our unspoken truth, a truth that had been laid bare in that fleeting, devastating moment. The silence that followed was not empty. It throbbed with the ghost of what could be and the crushing weight of what could not. The Shanghai Confession. The 4 days in Shanghai were an unrelenting masterpiece of emotional suppression. In every interaction, we were two professionals walking a tightrope of forbidden desire, inches above an abyss, our balance constantly threatened. Our eyes would meet across the conference table, a silent language passing between them that no one else could comprehend, a dangerous, unspoken pact. We spoke of market trends and design philosophies, but every gesture, every lingering glance, every shared laugh was charged with an unspoken current, a treacherous undertow threatening to pull us both under, to drown us in what we couldn't acknowledge. On the final evening, we ended up on the rooftop terrace, a necessary quiet after a brutal day of negotiations. The city was a glittering, electric ocean below us. Its vibrant energy, its soaring skyscrapers and neon glow only amplifying the intensity of our internal struggle, mirroring the chaos within. "You are relentless, Aisha," Jae-sung said, his voice quiet, almost reverent, as he turned to face me, his gaze searching. "A warrior, Few men in this company possess your fortitude, your sheer will. It's the only way to survive the system, I replied, watching the neon reflections blur into shimmering streaks below, a defense mechanism born of necessity. He turned fully to me, the sorrow in his eyes profound and arresting, a shared burden visible in their dark depths. I, too, maintain a commitment of duty, he confessed, his voice barely audible above the city hum, raw with a pain that resonated with my own. One that will bind me to an alliance for the sake of the family legacy. It is correct, it is necessary, but it is not a relationship of passion. It is a contract, a gilded cage. The revelation stunned me, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. He wasn't married, he was single, but his freedom was a ticking clock, counted down to an inevitable date. He was bound by an imminent arranged engagement, a professional necessity that perfectly mimicked my own lie, a parallel deception. The bitter irony of our shared prisons hit me with full, devastating force. We were both prisoners of expectation, playing roles in a grand corporate drama, desperate for release, for a truth we couldn't grasp. I haven't felt this alive in years, he admitted, closing the distance between us, his voice raw with a desperate need, an unquenchable fire that defied his controlled demeanor. The conviction, the fire, it is intoxicating. And I respect your commitments, Aisha. I respect the ring. The words were meant to be a comfort, a respectful acknowledgement of my supposed bond, but they felt like a fresh wound, twisting the knife of my deceit deeper. How could he respect a lie, a symbol of my own self-betrayal, a testament to my fear? He stopped, inches from me. The air between us was buzzing, thick with unspoken demands, with the dangerous hum of a truth desperate to break free, a current that threatened to overwhelm us both. His eyes, usually so controlled, burned with an untamed intensity, reflecting the neon glow of the city like twin fires, a dangerous, beautiful inferno. The burden of my lie, of the cold, dead weight of the gold band on my finger, became unbearable. I had to confess. The truth, however devastating, was my only release, my only chance for genuine air. "Jae-sung-si," I whispered, lifting my left hand, the one bearing the symbol of deception, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. "I have to tell you." He cut me off. He reached out and captured my hand, the very one I was trying to reveal. He lifted it slowly, deliberately, bringing it to his lips, interrupting my confession. He pressed a single, devastatingly chaste kiss to my knuckles, directly over the ring. It was an act of profound agony, honoring the boundary of the lie, yet pouring every ounce of his suppressed passion, his unspoken longing, into the formal touch. It was a farewell, not just to me, but to a possibility that hadn't even begun, a future he was choosing to relinquish for the sake of duty, for the sake of his legacy, for the sake of my supposed commitment. The warmth of his lips, the slight rasp of his skin against mine, sent a jolt through me, a desperate, final connection before the severing. "Good night, Aisha," he breathed against my skin, his voice thick with unsaid goodbyes, a lament for what could never be, for a future stolen before it could even blossom. He released me, his hand falling away like a stone, leaving me stranded with the burning memory of his lips against the cold gold, watching him disappear into the glittering labyrinth of the city lights, a paradox of desire and despair. The interruption. The truth was worth the detonation of my career. The flight had been a blur of agonizing self-reflection, the weight of the lie crushing me, the memory of Jae-sung's kiss a constant, searing reminder of what I stood to lose and what I might, impossibly, gain. I would tell him everything, accept the consequences, and hope, against all logic, that the fierce truth he spoke of could somehow survive the wreckage. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of order, felt like a temporary holding cell, my luggage still half unpacked, a testament to my unsettled, volatile state. I was staring at the ring, the cold gold glinting under the dim light, when Minho's frantic call came through, a violent buzz against the silence, shattering my fragile calm. Aisha, he's back early. He's on his way to your apartment now. Some lame excuse about a design flaw. He couldn't wait. Minho's voice was tight with urgency, laced with a fear that instantly infected me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against a rising tide of adrenaline. He was coming. He was breaking protocol, shattering the carefully maintained distance, driven by a force he could no longer suppress, a desperate hope for truth. This was it, the moment of reckoning, the precipice. The doorbell chimed, formal, insistent, echoing in the quiet apartment, a signal that destiny was at my door. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the deadbolt. Through the peephole, I saw the raw, beautiful determination on Jae-sung's face. His jaw was set, his dark eyes burning with an unmistakable purpose, a man who had made a monumental decision, ready to tear down walls, ready to face the impossible. This is it. The risk, the truth, the possibility of everything. I pulled the bolt back. My phone vibrated with a text from Minho, a shrill warning sound, milliseconds too late, a death knell to my hopes, a harbinger of disaster. Wait, Soo-min is back in Seoul, his fiancée. She is traditional, powerful, and ruthless. If she sees him there or finds out about the lie, she will ruin the contract and your life. The door swung inward. My breath caught, poised on the precipice of confession, hope, and terror battling in my chest, a desperate, silent war. But it wasn't Jae-sung. Standing on my threshold, regal and chillingly composed, was a woman dressed in expensive Korean silk, a deep emerald green that seemed to absorb all light, casting a subtle, predatory sheen. Her beauty was severe, almost intimidating, her flawless skin and elegant features honed by generations of privilege. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, held the chilling stillness of pure, inherited power, a quiet authority that spoke of ancient lineage and unshakable influence. In her gloved hand, she held a silver-framed photograph of herself and Jae-sung, dated from a formal engagement ceremony, the image capturing them in traditional hanbok, their smiles composed, their hands linked in a gesture of dynastic alliance. It wasn't a picture of love, but of destiny, of a future meticulously planned and executed, a cold, undeniable claim. Aisha she stated, her voice a low, lethal silk, each syllable perfectly enunciated, carrying the crushing weight of her name, her family, her power. I am Shin Soo-min, Jae-sung's fiancé. My family and I are to join the Shin Group through alliance next month, a merger of legacies, you could say. Her words were a chilling pronouncement, a definitive, territorial claim that solidified the ground beneath me into ice. She stepped into the apartment, uninvited, her gaze sweeping over the scattered luggage and my disheveled state, lingering with unnerving precision on the ring on my finger. A silent, knowing accusation flashed in her sharp, assessing expression. And I want to know where your husband is, because my fiancé has made an unscheduled and highly inappropriate detour before coming home tonight. A detour that, I suspect, involves you. The last words hung in the air, cold and sharp as a newly forged blade, leaving no doubt as to the consequences of my deception and the precariousness of my very existence in her meticulously ordered world. The game had just changed, irrevocably, and I was utterly, terrifyingly unprepared for this new, formidable opponent who held my career, and perhaps my life, in her impeccably manicured hands. My lie was meant to protect my career. Now it has brought his powerful fiancé to my door, and Jae-sung is on his way. Will I confess the truth and risk everything? Or will I maintain the facade and let Jae-sung drown in his guilt? The intensity between us, did it finally come to a head, only to be crushed before it could truly begin? This is the end of part 1. Come back next week for part 2 to find out what happens when his fiancé arrived at Aisha's door and how she navigates that impossible crisis.